The scripture lesson today comes from Psalm 40. I once waited with anxious anticipation for Yahweh, and sure enough, God bent down toward me and heard my plea. God drew me up from the pit of chaos and out of the mud and muck, and set my feet upon solid ground, making my steps secure. God put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise. Many see it, tremble, and put their trust in Yahweh. Blessed are those who put their trust in Yahweh, who do not turn to gods of the sea, who do not go astray after idols. Yahweh, my God, you have multiplied your wondrous deeds and your thoughts toward us. No one compares to you with you. Were I to proclaim and tell of all you've done, the deeds would be innumerable. Sacrifice and sin offering you do not desire, but you cleaned your ears and you listened more deeply to me. Burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. Then I said, here I am. In the scroll of the book, it is written of me. I delight to do your will, O my God, your will at a gut level. I have told the good news of liberation in the great congregation. See, I have not restrained my lips, as you know, O Lord. I have not hidden your saving help within my heart. I have spoken of your faithfulness and your salvation. I have not concealed your steadfast love and your faithfulness from the great congregation. Do not, O Lord, withhold your mercy from me. Let your steadfast love and your faithfulness keep me safe forever. For evils have encompassed me, and they are innumerable. My own sins have caught up to me. I'm blind to what you're doing, for my sin are more than the hairs of my head, and it robs me of my courage. Please, Yahweh, deliver me. Yahweh, hurry up and help me. Let all those who blush with shame and confusion, who seek to snatch away my life, let those who desire my demise fall into disgrace and be failed by dishonor. Let them spiral in shame who say to me, aha, aha. But may all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who love your salvation say continually, great is Yahweh. As for me, I am poor and needy, but the Lord takes thought for me. You are my help and my deliverer. Take my desperation into account, oh my God. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
About 10 years ago, I had an idea to write a book on grief. I imagined it as a set of daily devotionals for people who are grieving to walk through day after day of their grief while they proceed through the 7 stages of grief: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. The idea felt so solid and so orderly that I applied for a $15,000 grant with the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship and said, I have this crazy idea to write this book. And they were dumb enough to give me $15,000 to do it. And so for a year, I traveled around the country interviewing scholars, counselors, and theologians. And that is when my solid idea fell apart. See, I learned that the 7 stages of grief are not really stages. They do, in fact, name real feelings. They do, in fact, name real experiences. But people hear the word stages and they assume that it's sort of a linear process, a straight line, a checklist, a set of steps that you move through one by one until you're all finished. And then you can just move on with your life. And that assumption actually makes processing grief harder. Therapists told me that when we expect grief to move in a nice, neat, rational sequence, we often feel like we're failing when the old emotions return again. Like we're taking some kind of a step backward, like we're doing too much for ourselves and too much for other people. Because the messiness of human reality can just keep swirling in on itself. Anger in grief can show up at the same time as acceptance. Depression can return after acceptance. And so instead of moving forward in a straight line, grief actually tends to circle back in on itself. It swirls, it doubles back, and it refuses to stay put. I was trying to think of a great image, and I just had this idea of trying to get a cat in a bathtub. Like it's just not going to hold still. It's not going to let you wrestle it down and control it. It's not going to let you move on. It is utterly uncontrollable and unpredictable. That's the nature of grief. Grief doesn't move in straight lines and it doesn't follow a clean pattern. And when we think it does, we end up fighting against ourselves. Grief brings a whole medley of competing feelings that just don't go together. Once you notice that grief does not move in a straight line, Psalm 40 actually makes a lot more sense. See, many scholars describe Psalm 40 as an incoherent medley. A medley is a song that was put together out of the bones of other songs, trying to sort of combine these things into a coherent theme. But what the scholars were saying was literally, I mean this literally, historically, literarily, they said this psalm is really weird because it seems like what it really is a bunch of other hymns that were put together without any real rhyme or reason. It's kind of a Frankenstein of songs, you might say. Mismatching body parts and mismatching themes. And as I got to studying Psalm 40, it made sense. Like, I understand why these scholars were saying that. The psalm swings dramatically in tone 2 or 3 times. I don't know if you noticed it. It seemed like at the very beginning, nothing is wrong with the world, right? It's like, God, you are so great, and everything is so awesome with my life, and things could not be better. And then just on a dime, it turns to, God, I am so sinful, and things are going so badly for me, and life couldn't be worse, and all these people hate me. You're like, wait a minute, like, how did this happen? The psalm feels strange because it refuses to behave, in fact, like almost any other psalm of its kind. For example, almost every other psalm that grapples with grief follows a very strict pattern. It looks like this. The psalm starts with distress and grief and then proceeds to God intervening and the psalmist expressing gratitude. That is the normal process of what is called a lament hymn. Grief, God works, movement to gratitude. Grief toward gratitude is a straight line. There are about 50 of those psalms that move in that order. But Psalm 40 does the exact opposite. Psalm 40 opens instead with gratitude and then moves toward grief. If it were a movie, we would call it a tragedy. Things start off well, by the end things are not well. It turns expectations upside down, and in doing so, Psalm 40 feels unstable. It feels unpredictable. It feels chaotic. A Frankenstein, a cat that won't get in the tub. However, while some scholars struggle to make sense of a psalm that feels so unstable, human experience, I think, recognizes it much more immediately. Anyone who has ever known grief knows that it does not move neatly or predictably. Healing happens in loops. Memory interrupts good times. Memory interrupts bad times. Acceptance does not cancel out depression. We dream about the people that we have lost years later, after we think we have already moved on to accepting their loss. To this day, 17 years after my dad died, and 11 years on Wednesday since my mom died, I have long since assumed that I have accepted their passing. And yet to this day, I still have dreams about them. They're not as frequent as they once were, but they'll happen. In my dreams, I'll be sitting around doing something not important with my parents and laughing, talking about life. And almost every time, no matter what we're doing, almost every time at some point in the dream, the rational side of my brain will kick in. And I will literally say in the dream, hey, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be here. You're dead. And something about being with them and yet realizing that I shouldn't be with them causes this medley of joy and deep grief to where I will, in my dream, I will start weeping. And apparently not just in my dream, because I start weeping in my sleep and my wife gets woken up by it. And she's shaking me awake like, what is happening in this dude's dreams? It feels so emotionally chaotic because on the one hand, I don't want to be woken up from my dream. I haven't seen my parents in 11 and 17 years. And on the other hand, I absolutely want to be woken up from my dream. I feel gratitude and grief at the exact same time. Because grief is a mess. And gratitude and grief can exist at the same time together. I love Psalm 40 because it tells us that truth about grief. It doesn't offer us a formula. It doesn't offer us stages to neatly go through. It refuses to reduce sorrow to a set of stages that we're just supposed to check off. And it acknowledges that my grief may not look like yours. Maybe the normal grief does move from grief to gratitude. I don't know, but mine doesn't have to look that way. Mine can be abnormal. Your grief does not have to look like mine. We can name patterns, we can name experiences, we can name emotions, but we all move through those things differently, and that's okay. Our own time and our own way, and that's okay. I think one of the frustrations that I've historically had with church is that I feel like church is often this place where we come together and we just have everything tidy and it feels good, right? Like I have to put on a face and pretend that life doesn't suck like it feels like it sucks. We have to have this nice and tidy spiritual life and emotional life. We prefer stories and songs that say something like, I was once lost, but now I'm found. How amazing is that grace? But I love that Psalm 40 insists on being honest. It sounds more like, I was once lost, and then I was found, and then I was lost again. And sometimes I still feel lost. And even when I feel found, the loss kind of stays with me. And even when I feel lost, I still find gratitude rising up inside that loss. That is the human experience. And Psalm 40 insists that grief and gratitude do not work like math equations. They work like music, a medley of songs brought together, tested by reality, minor keys and major keys playing together in this symphony of what it means to be human. Because here's the truth. You will never be who God created you to be if you cannot allow yourself to be human. Because you are created to be human with all of its limitations and all of its frailties and all of its grief, including loss and mortality. Scholars may say that the structure of this does not make sense, but mourners look at Psalm 40 and say, yeah, actually that's the point, because grief doesn't have to make sense. If I can use another metaphor before I close, sometimes I think grief works less like a road map and more like a GPS. When my wife and I travel together, my ADD kicks in. As soon as we get on the highway, it's like the rhythm of the highway, the rhythm of the wheels, and my mind is immediately gone. I am thinking deep thoughts about how wonderful my life is and how I'm so grateful to be with this woman and my children. And I will be so deep in thought that the GPS will say, turn in 2 miles. And I don't even hear it. Because life is good, man. And then we get right up on the exit and I'm still just thinking about how life is good. And then my wife starts screaming at me. Tom! Tom! You're about to miss the exit! And a lot of times it's too late. I love traveling by myself because when I lose the GPS, the only person who inconveniences is me. If I don't have time to get over and hit the exit, then I don't have time to get over and get the exit. But when I'm with my wife, Tom! Next thing I know, I've driven right past it, and she's not yelling at me anymore. You know what she's doing? Just side-eyeing me. And I don't have to look at her to know. I'm a responsible driver. I keep looking at the road, but I know I'm being side-eyed. She's frustrated because I did it again. I'm frustrated because she saw me do it again. But you know who never judges me? The GPS. The GPS doesn't panic. The GPS doesn't shame me. The GPS, I have often thought that GPS companies could make a ton of money by using celebrity voices to insult you when you miss a turn. Idiot, you did it again. But like in Samuel L. Jackson's voice. Right? But like the GPS doesn't do that. They're so kind. It's so polite. It doesn't say you missed it again. It doesn't side-eye me. It just calmly says to me, reroute at the next turn. They are relentlessly patient with me, the GPSs. They simply show me a new route and keep me moving, and people with ADD know that you never get anywhere by just going A to B. You got to see all the things. And the GPS just joins you on the journey. Psalm 40 works like that. It doesn't stand over us for missing the exit on grief. It doesn't scold us for going backward after you thought you were going forward in grief. It simply names where you are now and says, let's keep going. This is where I think Psalm 40 is so most powerfully Christian. Because the God who meets us in this looping, unfinished, rerouting grief does not stay safely above grief, but actually enters into the grief, receiving it into God's very body. Jesus prays psalms like this one. Jesus gives thanks. Jesus trusts. Jesus weeps. Jesus begs. Jesus mourns. Jesus grieves at the loss of his friends. He does not move through suffering in a straight line either, because he is human. Even on the night when Jesus gave us the communion meal, gratitude and grief are sitting at the table with him. He blesses the bread, knowing that his body is going to be broken. Blessing and brokenness going together. He shares the cup, knowing that loss is coming. That the sharing and the connection will also be accompanied by disconnection. Communion is therefore not the place where grief gets resolved. It is the place where God is saying, I am still with you. You didn't have to get off on that exit. Let's keep going. So we come to this table not because we've finished grieving, but because Christ meets us in the middle of the journey of grief. Because Christ is the one who reroutes us, taking into account our frailty and our human limitations. And when Christ does reroute us, it is always with mercy. And this meal is just one more moment of sustenance on a journey that is not a straight line.